Venture Partners webinar series. I'm Brandon Hickey, Market Strategy Manager for OpenView Venture Partners portfolio companies, and I will be moderating today's discussion. Our discussion today will be on how to build a customer success culture with strong sales alignment and collaboration. For today's discussion, I will be joined on the call by Dave Blake, who's the founder and CEO of ClientSuccess, which is a customer success management platform that's used by many of our portfolio companies, as well as other players in the B2B software space. Prior to ClientSuccess, Dave was the VP of Global Account Management at Adobe, where he prioritized strong retention and growth for strategic and enterprise customers and launched the Customer Experience and Insights program there. Dave is one of the initial trailblazers in the customer success movement and brings a unique perspective to today's conversation as a former operator and now vendor in the customer success space. Our other two panelists are both from Instructure, an OpenView portfolio company that has revolutionized the learning management space and IPO'd last November. The first of those panelists is Mitch Macfarlane. Mitch Macfarlane is the SVP of Customer Experience at Instructure. Mitch has been with Instructure since 2011 when he joined the team to build out the client services practice, which was later rebranded to Customer Success. Mitch has overseen the evolution of this team and its mandate from the early expansion days through the IPO. In that time, he's seen the organization grow from 3 employees to more than 227 employees today. So he brings a very interesting perspective to the table and has spent a lot of time thinking about customer success and sales alignment, and it's important in a hyper-growth business. Marc is his counterpart and is on the opposite side of the house of sales. Marc Maloy comes as our third panelist. He's the Executive Vice President of Worldwide Sales at Instructure, and Marc has built out and led 2 sales organizations from early expansion stage through IPO. First with HireRight, and now with Instructure, where he manages a sales team of just over 200 people. So Marc offers a unique perspective on how to think about sales and success alignment from the sales perspective. And he's seen it both from the early days of expansion all the way through IPO as well. I hope you all are as excited as I am to learn from these experiences. If you have any questions, please send them via a chat to the organizers and panelists in GoToWebinar. We will set aside some Q&A time at the end of this call to answer any of these questions that aren't able to be answered during the discussion. Please send them as they arise so that we can attempt to incorporate them. Without further ado, I'm going to go over and hand off the lead to Dave Blake to kick off our discussion around best practices and alignment. Dave?
Thanks, Brandon, and appreciate the opportunity to be on this OpenView webinar, and thanks the OpenView team for hosting it. And I'm honored to share the discussion with 2 of the top sales leaders out there, Mitch Macfarlane and Marc Maloy. Both of these gentlemen are very experienced, as Brandon shared, of building and scaling sales and customer success teams in a world-class company and in a world-class organization. Today we're going to focus on some key things around sales and success collaboration alignment. And in doing that, SaaS companies typically have a focus on revenue. Revenue is king for all SaaS companies, and most SaaS companies spend a tremendous amount of time and effort building sales and marketing engines. But the most savvy SaaS companies also focus and invest heavily on the customer success side of their business as well. And as they know that the lifeblood of a SaaS business is really the existing customer base. So today we're going to talk about how aligning sales and success and driving deep collaboration across the entire organization will help you maximize your revenue across your SaaS business and also drive long-term customer success and lifetime value of the customer. So with that, we want to talk about 4 main pillars or foundations to driving this SaaS and success alignment. We call them the 4 C's, starting with culture, communication, collaboration, and compensation. So let's jump right into it. Start with culture. We have a saying at ClientSuccess that customer success is a culture, it's not a department. and that driving a culture of customer success throughout an entire organization is key to your long-term success as a company, especially within SaaS. And to do that, it has to start at the top of an organization. You need the buy-in from your CEO, your senior executive team, and ultimately your sales and customer success leaders. So I want to start by and ask Mark and Mitch to talk a little bit about Instructure. I know that they have a very focused culture of customer success, and just want to start up by having them share a little bit about their culture, how that's driven from the top, and specifically how they drive a culture of customer success in their organizations.
Sounds great. Hey everyone, this is Mitch Macfarlane. Thrilled to be a part of this webinar today. As far as the culture at Instructure, very early on, in fact, one of the reasons why I took this job is because our CEO believes in providing a world-class customer experience, and that is pervasive throughout the organization. It doesn't matter if you're dealing with our finance team or our legal team or our sales team. Everything that everyone does is aligned around the customer experience and essentially setting ourselves apart in the marketplace, differentiating ourselves on that customer experience. And so we have 7 core values at Instructure. One of those, and I would say that the real centerpiece, is customer experience. It's something that we drive home hard to all of the employees. Anytime new employees are hired, I have the opportunity to go and meet with those folks and tell them all about how we are aligned as an organization behind the customer experience, and how it's not just my job running the customer success organization, but it's really everyone's job. If you're in marketing, if you're in product, if you're in engineering, all of us have this goal of providing the world-class customer experience.
Yeah, and this is Mark. To build upon what Mitch said, a little bit of the guts under this kind of ethos around really taking care of your clients. Mitch in particular runs just an unbelievably fantastic customer success organization. And what that means to me is it's all formulaic and it's all trigger based. So picture what happens, right? Let's say your business is growing from 50 million to 75 million in bookings or something like that, and you intend to grow 50% year over year. If everyone's looking around the table and thinking about, well, gee, when we grow that quickly, how are we going to support our clients? And is Mitch going to have to ask questions and fight battles with the CFO about hiring additional headcount to deploy against the success that you've had in your sales organization? If you have to have that conversation, you're kind of not doing it the right way. So in other words, everything is actually based on quantity of salespeople. It's backed in from a budgeting perspective, and that allows Mitch and his team to really focus on onboarding people very effectively to deliver an outstanding experience to our clients.
Hey, Mitch, let me dive in a little bit in that. How would you describe the difference between customer experience and customer success?
Or
is there a difference?
Dave, there is a difference. Essentially, my job as SVP of Customer Experience is to look at the entire customer life cycle. Even if the folks who are interfacing with customers don't report to me in the hierarchy. So as our lead gen team is interfacing with customers, or our RFP writers, if they're doing something that creates a less than world-class customer experience, I get involved, right? So customer success, the organization that I run, is really built around making sure that customers are successful, whatever their vision is for the products that they purchased, making sure that they achieve that and maximizing customer lifetime value. However, the customer experience title is broader than that and extends across the organization, across the hierarchy, to ensure that all touch points are positive and world-class.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. I think if we think about other aspects or profiles of world-class companies that have a customer success culture, these bullet points share some of those attributes. Do they have senior customer success executives that are focused on this, that are have the right titles and are around the executive table? Do you have significant focus on customers and customer success in board meetings? Do you have executive bonuses tied to those, to customer success and cross-functional accountability? Do you guys have anything in your organization along these bullet points that that you found that's more successful than another as you've really tried to drive that culture there at Instructure?
Sure. So the second bullet that you've got here, Dave, I think is really important. It's not just board meetings, it's all executive meetings. It's anytime you get a group of employees together, somebody always needs to ask the question, what is the resulting customer experience from the decisions that we're making today? And so that significant focus has to be pervasive throughout the organization. And I think that that's key to our success here at Instructure.
I'll build on that. So I think for me, it's number 4. So having everybody really rallying around the end outcome, like an awesome outcome for a client, is super important. And the fact that our customer success organization shares very openly with every employee in the company their KPIs for what success looks like. Retention rates, net promoter score, both logo retention and revenue retention, right? Sharing that very, very transparently across the organization serves as a rallying cry to really get everybody behind the outcomes that our clients are seeking. And so for me personally, being able to look across the organization and see exactly what Mitch's organization is doing on behalf of the entire business has been very, very good for the sales guys when they're out in the field selling.
That's great, Mark. I know we had a specific thing that worked well at Adobe, where we really wanted to improve the overall customer experience and change the culture to be more deeply focused on customer success. And we implemented the third bullet point. We added executive bonuses tied to the executives based on customer success and retention and overall customer experience. And that had a huge impact in evolving the culture to be more focused on the customer experience, and one that I'd highly recommend to the organizations on the call today.
Agreed.
So moving on,
we do that one as well. Yep. Yeah, I was just saying that we do that as well here, and it really does help.
Well, just real quick before we move on, just what are the types of bonus or compensation or KPIs do you tie to the executives? Do you have one or two you could share real quick before we move on?
Sure. I think the two that are applicable here are revenue, and the revenue goals are not possible without a very high revenue retention rate, and in fact a net negative churn rate, so beyond 100% retention, right? The other one is NPS scores, and so those two factors play into executive bonuses.
And for those of you looking to take your company public one day or raise more money, the net negative retention rate absolutely warrants paying a higher forward-looking revenue multiple.
That's great. I would say if those listening on the call today, think about your organization and your company, and which of these attributes are implemented at your company. If you don't have those, then it's definitely worth taking a step back and looking at how you can evolve your own organization to establish that culture of customer success, because that's the foundation for everything. Let's move on to communication. Communication is key in everything we do in sales and customer success. And when we talk about communication and alignment, it's not only internal, but it's also external with customers. Having transparency with customers, having a united voice of customers, and really understanding your customers' needs. One of the first places where a communication is absolutely critical is in the handoff. The initial handoff from a prospect to a customer, from sales to post-sales within an organization is critical. We just had an experience in our company. We started a relationship with a new service provider had a very good sales experience, but that transition from sales to execution and go forward was a mess. And as a result, we had very little communication. We had a lot of lack of we had no transparency. We had no vision of our journey from closing the deal to getting up and running, and a lack of attention to detail. And for us as the buyer, it really broke down trust, and we started questioning our decision, and we had no excitement. And so we want to really talk about, in this section, about the handoff. How do you orchestrate a handoff that builds trust, confidence, and excitement with your customers? Because we know that the long-term success can be really determined in this window of opportunity. So Mitch and Mark, I know you guys have really focused on nailing the handoff between your two teams. We'd love to have you guys share some of the best practices and keys that you found in this stage of the customer journey.
Sure. So ideally, we would love to have the salesperson on the kickoff call with the customer-facing operations folks, right? Our customer success manager, our implementation consultant, our trainer, et cetera. But with RDs who travel and we want them out hunting new deals, it isn't always possible. And so we've had to adjust by creating essentially a question set that accompanies that customer from the very early beginnings of lead generation when they contact our market development representatives. Those folks ask questions, record the data, that data gets passed along to sales. Sales enhances that data set with the customer's goals and vision and what they want to accomplish, what their key points of interest were, what their challenges are. And all of that data gets transferred along to the customer success manager, who now has essentially this history of the client and can really hit the ground running with them. So even though sometimes we're not able to get that salesperson on the handoff call, all of the information has been transferred, and that puts customers at ease very, very quickly when they know that we have an understanding of who they are and what they're trying to accomplish. I think one of the other things that we do is, because we have such a big org, especially in support, we use our own product, right? So we have a corporate training platform called Bridge, and we create Bridge courses that include details on specific clients for our support team. And so all of the support reps are required to essentially pass off that they have knowledge on this new client that's being added as a Tier 1 support offering. And so that's another way that we make sure that the knowledge transfer happens and that our folks are up to speed on the details of that client.
Yeah, and let me build off that one as well, because this is, I think, really, really important as you're marching up the scale stage in your growth businesses. So the way that Mitch and I kind of think about it is our job is to earn our unfair share of the various markets that we serve. And we do that through a variety of ways, but one of kind of the four key ways that I think about is we have a really, really well understood and articulated demand gen process, where when demand comes in the house and that demand is converted, we do a really good job of doing what Mitch just said, keeping track of who the client is and what's important to them. And then the second thing we do is we push that demand into a written, taught sales process where we certify all of our reps on our sales reps on how a deal goes from cold call to close or start to finish, and how it flows through qualified, evaluation, shortlist, negotiation, and close. And it's not enough just to tell people and put it in a knowledge base. You have to certify them on the process so they all do it the same way. And that then becomes a basis from which you can predictably forecast your revenue, not only in the quarter, but the next quarter. And then we certify folks on their demo and the message that they deliver during their demo. So it's not like we want everybody to do it our way. We want reps to exercise judgment, but there's a foundation from which we really, really want to build upon, and we call that our sales pick and roll. And then the fourth thing we do is we certify a methodology. And if you do those four things really well and you have that foundation, it really allows you to build a predictable, cost-effective revenue engine where client data follows the client from cold call all the way through renewal, and allows all of our teams to just be much more successful. And we train our teams, using our product.
That's great. So maybe give an idea of what are the tools that you use to capture that information? Obviously, I know you use Salesforce. A lot of that information is captured there and then shared with the rest of the organization. Is that how you continue that knowledge transfer at the beginning and ongoing?
That's correct. Yep. So at the beginning, it's Salesforce through our lead gen activities over to the sales team and then over to the CSMs. And a little plug for Dave's product here. Essentially, that data then gets fed out of Salesforce into the ClientSuccess app that we use, and that's how our CSMs consume it, and that's what they update, which feeds back into Salesforce. So, say a regional director wants to follow up on their account, it's all at their fingertips.
Yeah, and then when they do that, it kind of gets handed off to an install-based salesperson at some point as well. Yeah. And we use Chatter pretty extensively to keep track of state of the union with the account.
That's great. And how often do you guys, you talked about understanding the client's key objectives and sharing those. How often do you find that you're going back to update those? And Mark, specifically, what role does your team after the sale play in, that continual conversation with the customer about their needs and their ongoing goals?
Frankly, very little is the truth, right? So Mitch's organization handles all that, and he'll describe this in a moment, but he runs a very tight QBR type of process. Now, if an existing account then becomes competitive again, whether it's an RFP or the needs have changed significantly, and maybe there's some kind of shopping event, that's when Mitch will hand it back to my team to go run that engagement. And there's kind of the reverse handoff, if you will, at that point, where we do the reverse data dump from the client success organization to the sales organization. But that's really about it. I mean, we're truly kind of a hunting, farming organization, if you will.
Yep. Yeah. Great. One of the things we've talked about the handoff, but the collaboration that you can feel it on the call, that you guys you two as leaders are speaking frequently, you're collaborating, you're on the same page, which kind of goes on to just this ongoing aligned communication between the success team and the sales team. Tell us, how often do you two meet? And is it, I'm sure it's formal and informal, but how often do you formally meet? And then how do you encourage, what do you encourage your teams to do as far as regular cadence of communication with your respective teams?
Sure. So informally, daily, right? Mark and I see each other all the time, and we're very quick to address issues that come up. So if there's a misunderstanding, or we want to know more details about a deal, or Mark wants to know the status of a renewal, we just walk to each other's desk and say, hey, what's going on? Or we reach out through Slack. We're an organization that uses Slack. And so we're very in touch, and that has reduced the need for formal meetings. We used to have a fairly regular cadence every couple of weeks. We'd get together with the sales leadership, talk about big deals that were coming. But what we found is that the informal communication, while being reinforced through leadership, is really what's making this ship sail well, right? And so we've eliminated the need for big, heavy meetings with the leadership teams, and it's really about the rank and file coordinating with each other. And so, for example, one of Mark's salespeople will reach out to our head of higher ed customer success management, or a head of K-12 customer success management, and let them know details about an upcoming deal, even assign a customer success manager early so that they can get involved in some of the late stage pre-sales process. And it's just that tight collaboration, and I think we're jumping onto your fourth or your third C here, Dave, but yeah, it's constant communication that leads to tight collaboration.
Yeah, and it starts before, Mitch, I think this is the critical piece, right? Before the sale. So as we have a very large pipeline and deals progress through the sales process that I've described, oftentimes for the larger type deals where it's maybe 200 to 300 grand or more in ARR, you form a huddle and you do strategy review on the deal prior to it being sold, and that's when you generally would involve Mitch's team, whether it be an implementation consultant or whether it be Mitch himself. I do, Mitch has diamond status, right? So he does a lot of customer or pre-customer deals with me and my team, and it's absolutely fantastic to have that level of support from the client success organization, just to really clearly articulate to a prospective client what they can expect post-sale, and ensure that so that's just really, really good communication that actually goes to the client as well.
That's great. I was able to benefit from a sales counterpart when I was leading an organization at a CS organization at Omniture. His name was Stephen Frieder, and like you two, we had an incredible amount of communication together, but then really encouraged that and fostered that throughout our entire teams. And it really was a strategic advantage for us, where we really got to the point where we knew each other well. We were working, tag teaming for our customers' benefit, and having this proactive and transparent communication. And absolutely critical between these two organizations. Let's go on to the third one, and we talk about collaboration. I love this principle that Disney often says, is that when you ask about who owns the customer, they say everybody does, and somebody always owns the moment. So they collaborate and almost choreograph how they're going to deliver this amazing customer experience throughout the entire journey of the customer. So we want to talk a little bit about collaboration. We believe that the first starts with really having clearly defined roles and responsibilities across the teams. And as we look out there today in the market, we see three models that are at play across different SaaS organizations. Model one, where the sales teams own all sales activity, including expansion, renewals, and the customer success team is really about driving value and usage and adoption. The second model is where sales team focuses primarily on new logos, and the customer success team takes expansion and renewals. And the third model is where they introduce a third, sometimes called a renewal specialist, that really focuses primarily on the renewals and expansion. Mitch and Mark, which model do you guys use and why?
Yeah, so it's really been an evolution. We started out with Model 1. We moved to Model 2 because the CSMs were closer to the customer, understood the environment a little bit better for upsells and renewals, and frankly, we didn't have to pay them as much as RDs. We wanted the RDs out hunting whales, right? Not picking berries. So,
yeah.
And we've really moved toward Model 3 there, where we have an expansion team or an install-based sales team, and we're currently contemplating if we follow a similar path with renewals. There are pros and cons to that, and we're weighing that out as an organization to determine what would be the best path forward for the customer.
Exactly. So we're really kind of Model 2.5 right now, where my team handles expansion, but Mitch is still handling renewals. But we're contemplating going to Model 3.
So Mark, the expansion team reports into you, and that's all they're focused on is expansion and renewals?
Yeah, actually they don't. Just expansion.
Oh,
so
sorry,
just
expansion.
Yeah, so it's just a renewal that's handled by Mitch's team, but yeah, my team, the expansion team, is really in charge of trying to share additional value with the installed base of clients, whether it be support, services, statement of works, whatever. Yeah, they actively prospect against the base.
Yeah, and a key piece of information here is, as Mark and I looked at, and we weren't really looking at these models, right, but looking at what the organization needed. And as we looked at upsells, we said, okay, we think we need a separate team. Where should it report? And ultimately, Mark and I got together and we said, hey, neither one of us really cares. It's not about building a kingdom. How do we make these folks successful? And we came to the conclusion that we want them living in the sales org and sort of living, sleeping, breathing the sales mentality of being hunters, rather than the sort of empathetic, super compassionate culture that I breed down in my department.
And conversely, you know, when you really kind of think through that, my opinion, and I think Mitch's as well, we've talked about this, is that you don't want your client success manager to feel pressured under a quota. You want them to be patient, gentle, thoughtful, help their clients avoid landmines, really help them navigate various alternatives, as opposed to, you know, doing that, but you actually have to hit a number or your job's in trouble. So we're really trying to separate those two things. That's
great. So you've clearly defined the roles and responsibilities within Instructure. Sounds like it's a continued evolution. The next area of focus, and I know you guys have done a great job of this, is really mapping out the customer journey and proactively managing to that. As Disney says, is understanding who owns those moments. Tell us a little bit about your experience and the process of Instructure really coming to your current customer journeys and how that's been successful in really proactively managing to those.
Sure. So it sort of goes back to the idea that egos really aren't allowed at Instructure, right? It's not about what's best for me. It's about what's best for the customer, what's best for the company. And so this has been, again, an evolution in terms of our understanding in how to best satisfy the customer's needs and provide that world-class customer experience. And in fact, right now we're doing a deep dive, a customer journey map on all of the touch points customers have to evaluate whether or not our current model is working, right? And providing the experience that we want to be known for. So yeah, Dave, it's really been an evolution. The journey where we are right now, the start of lead gen activities, handoff to sales, handoff to CSMs, punt back to sales if it becomes competitive. This is something that we have worked out over time and feel very comfortable with.
Yeah, and Dave, when you think about what clients like and what they don't like, and you think about what does the buyer journey look like, and then what does the client journey look like, the outcomes that we all talk about, think about, and strive to achieve are we want the buyer journey and the client journey to be very, very simple. And so everything in our organization is really built around that overall goal. From it's really simple for someone to begin a shopping effort with our demand gen team. It's really simple for them to not have to answer thousands of questions in a discovery session because that actually annoys people, right? So we purposely don't do that. It's really simple for the salesperson to get the client data from the MDR, SDR, and have an effective conversation without having to go, re-ask the same questions. Once they get into contracting, our contract is intentionally built in a very client-friendly way where we eat a lot of the risk, and frankly, it's very, very short for a traditional MSSA. And clients look at it and they're like, wow, that's really simple. Our pricing, very straightforward, no nickel and diming, no hidden surprises, very, very simple. And so if you just kind of build your organization around that kind of ethos, you really get a good result.
Yeah, I love that, Mark. I'm a big believer in keeping things simple as well, and definitely have learned over the years that customers do not want to absorb the complexity of your business. They expect, they don't care how things get done. They just expect a simple, clear journey and be able to know that somebody's taking care of them throughout that journey. How often you guys, last question on this topic, how often are you tweaking your journey, your buyer and customer journey maps?
So the map itself, this is the first time that we've really formally gone through the process. But in terms of the interactions, it's every 3 months or so. We look at it and reevaluate and say, hey, you know what, we're noticing a trend here. We really need to adapt.
I think one of the things on the pre-customer front that we changed that made a huge difference from my perspective is we pulled the SDR MDR team out of sales and put it into marketing.
Okay.
So it was just closer to how where demand was generated, and that's where those folks sit. And interestingly, the sales folks here at Instructure rarely work leads now. They're really working only opportunities. And those opportunities are very well defined, right? They're real ones through budget authority and time-bound need that have been identified. And I'd say, I've never even heard of a company doing that model where all of opportunity creation is actually handled in marketing. But it really, really works well here because our brand is very tightly coupled with the experience that we want our clients to have.
Yeah, I like how you guys have given the vision that the customer journey isn't just sales and customer success. It's all the interactions with the company from initial marketing through every other function, whether it be the billing team or product or others within the organization. So let's move on to the last C, compensation. Now this one, it can be from my experience, can be an interesting conversation about how compensation plans between customer success and sales complement each other or not, whether customer success managers should be on a variable comp or not. Just curious where compensation really drives action and behaviors. How do you guys look at compensation across your team and really driving the right behaviors across your team with compensation and KPIs?
Sure. So sort of a broad question there. We believe in compensation. So yes, Dave, we feel like it should reinforce the right behaviors. On the CSM side of the house, we have two components of variable compensation for them. One is the NPS score that they get from their own clients, the clients they manage, right? So it's an NPS sort of CSAT survey that goes out 3 times a year, and they have a bonus component that they get based on that. The other half of their bonus is based on market segment logo renewal rate. So I want folks looking at individual accounts, right? Let's not neglect an account because it's got a small revenue figure. Essentially, if we accept someone into the Instructure family and sign a contract with them, we're going to take care of them. And so we focus on logo renewal rate, and the entire department lives or dies by that number, which creates a very collaborative environment. They end up helping each other out with their renewals because they know that even if they hit all of their renewal targets, if Sally doesn't hit all of hers, that they're not going to get bonused. And we found that to be very effective on the CS side of the house.
That's great. So
yeah, go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, Mitch, so it's a team target for the logo retention, and there's some out there who say it's okay to lose a customer and really chase a revenue number, but your philosophy is no, we want to keep every logo that we can.
Yeah. So me as CS leadership, I'm chasing the dollars. Let's be honest, right? That's what the company needs. But I feel like for the culture within my team, I want them taking care of individual logos, no matter how small. That really reinforces the empathy, the shared goals, the compassion, the sort of the interactions that I want my folks having. I don't want them giving up on an account just because it's a small number.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
Mark, you were going to say something to share your insights.
Yeah, so sales side, we have a traditional MRR, or monthly recurring revenue comp plan, and that gets kicked for longer term customer relations, right? So if we sign something that's 3, 4, 5 year deal, the rate gets kicked, and so that's in alignment with keeping customers for a very long time. Number one. We've got provisions, although we don't exercise them very often at all. We've got provisions in our comp plans to claw back in the event of, say, gosh, one of my sales folks goes off kilter a little bit and sells someone something that maybe they shouldn't have, which then causes churn. We've got provisions to claw back. I got to tell you though, we do, number one, a pretty good job, although there are instances of where we sell something we probably shouldn't have. Yeah, so that's about it from a sales standpoint.
So, and Dave, I think you've got another slide here. I took a sneak peek at it. I would love for sales leadership, not individual salespeople, but sales leadership to be comped on retention, and it's something that I've advocated for within the company, and hopefully is a battle that one day I will win. But I think that having sales leadership aligned behind lifetime customer value is a very powerful concept, and it's going to ensure that they're selling the right kind of deals. I think if we didn't have the kind of alignment that Mark and I have, that this would be more important. It's really not necessary at this point because Mark's team doesn't sell stuff that we don't have, and we don't have a churn problem. And so we've identified the customer segment that matches our identity as a company, and we do very, very well selling into it.
That's great. Yeah, I think from my experience, I had a when you talk about compensation plans that are complementary or that reward the right behavior, we had a senior customer success manager who was managing a Vodafone relationship and really worked hard the entire year and really led out that relationship to the point where when it renewed at a multi-year deal and a multi-million-dollar contract. And afterwards, the CSM called me up and said, "Hey, I was the lone wolf on this account, and I got a $2,000 bonus, and my sales rep got a new yacht out of it." And so that was the first time that we thought about how do we start compensating the CSMs for their role in really driving retention and growth. And this slide is just an example of how organizations might consider it, of having this complementary where there's clear, no doubt clear focus on the primary goals of each function, growth for sales and retention for CSMs, but also rewards each other for collaborating around their respective goals. Just an example of one of many different types of comp plans that could be implemented to drive that collaboration. So today we've really talked about the fundamentals, the foundation of driving sales and customer success alignment around the 4 C's: culture, communication, collaboration, and compensation. Hopefully I know that I've really enjoyed hearing Mitch and Mark share their experiences and what they do in their world-class organizations, and have been able to get some other best practices or pointers to take back to your teams. I'll turn the time back over to Brandon, and we'll go into some Q&A.
Thanks, Dave. And thanks, Mitch and Mark. I think that was a great discussion that we had. It's obviously generated a number of questions from the audience that I'd like to put out there to see what you guys think and how you reflect on them. The first question we have is around KPIs with the organization, and it's from Nick Anderson. He asks, are customer success KPIs tied to each customer's specific goals, or are they standardized? And how do you translate that standardization?
Okay, great question. Largely they are standardized, right? What the team is measured against are standard goals. Although in check-ins, so when a manager is checking in with a CSM on his accounts, they're going over the individual details of that customer's goals, right? So for our product, being an education product, they may want X number of enrollments after 1 year. And so we dig into that as the manager with the employee. But in terms of measuring KPIs across the department, they're standardized, and it's based on the CSAT, the NPS, the renewal rates. We also do upsell lead gen through that team. And so these are all things that we measure.
Anyone else on that one?
Dave. Yeah, this is Dave. I'll add to that. Yeah, I agree. I think KPIs should be clear across the organization so that every individual in the organization understands how their their performance contributes to the overall performance of the company. We've built out here at ClientSuccess what we call a KPI tree that shows our goals from a revenue perspective, and it flows down through the organization so that everybody is aligned to these KPI, functional specific KPIs, but that can clearly see and connect the dots of how it contributes to our overall goals.
Okay. So the next question is really around account planning. It's from Depti Pradeep. I apologize if I mispronounced that. Are there specific accounts for which CS and sales conduct joint account planning? And if so, what is the cadence and best practices around this?
Sure, there are. They're rare, right? But for example, last year we won the state of North Carolina. And so that required significant collaboration between the two teams and planning as we scaled up the customer success team to bring these folks on board and needing to understand their unique situation. And so often it happens around really large accounts. For the everyday deals, it's much like what we discussed earlier, where an individual sales rep may reach out to the head of higher ed or K-12 or corporate CSM and do some handoff, share some information, get a CSM assigned if they feel like it's something that's warranted. Otherwise, it's the standard process.
I'll add my 2 cents there as well. This is Dave. In managing the strategic accounts team at Omniture, we definitely did account planning for those strategic accounts, as Mitch said as well. We tried to keep it simple. There's a lot of methodologies out there that are 11-page account plans. We tried to keep it to 2 pages because our philosophy is we'd rather keep it simple and execute than have a long plan that wasn't executed. The frequency that we used to do it was just try to encourage sales and customer success to plan together once a quarter, but then obviously have those ongoing regular touch points as they're executing the plan throughout the quarter.
Okay, so the next question we have from Brian Irwin. Is there a typical number of customers you've seen a single CSM be aligned to? And what are the factors that impact that variable?
Sure. So I think this is something that varies greatly with the type of company that you are and the size of deal that you sell. For us at Instructure, we found the sweet spot to be about 40 customers per CSM of our standard deals. When we have very large deals, talking 7-figure deals, then those will be a much smaller ratio. We have, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 to 1. And then we have some very small accounts, and we pass those to what we call our priority services team. And those folks are about 100 to 1 ratio. And so it depends on the type of customer, the size of the deal, the nature of the interaction. And I think it's up to each company to sort of find that sweet spot. I know that there's a rule of thumb out there that folks ought to have a $2 or $3 million book of business per CSM. And that might be a good sort of guidepost. I don't know that we stick to it religiously. We're more focused on the customer experience than on the revenue piece of it.
Anyone else on that one? Okay, so another question that's related to this from Nicholas Bryant. How do you guys segment your customers for this purpose to determine what is that ratio? What are the key factors you're using? Is it MRR, market segments, expansion or upsell opportunity? How do you think about that? What's the model you use?
Those are all criteria that factor in. The primary criteria is just the size of the deal. But if there is large upside potential in the deal, then we will keep it with our enterprise CSMs. If there is, any sort of large upside in terms of additional products or additional licenses, or if they're a marquee client, it's a name that we really want to take care of, even if they don't have the growth potential. It's a name that we want to be able to tout around the marketplace. We'll leave them with an enterprise rep rather than our priority services team.
And this is Dave. I think the key thing here that I'll add to what Mitch said, I agree on both of these points with everything he said. The key thing is to have a clear strategy of how you're going to segment your customers. And when you get to the point that you can do so, because there's different strategies based on a smaller customer, how you're going to engage with smaller customers, and how you're going to engage with your more large strategic customers. And rather than try to build out a strategy that's a one-size-fits-all, make sure you segment your customers in those different segmentations, and then really focus around the customer journey and how you're going to deliver an excellent experience across all the segments.
Perfect. All right, so we have another question around the sales handoff process. So Andre Carpentier asked, for the handoff, can sales transfer the client to the entire CSM team, or do you recommend always having a CSM specifically assigned to the client, and why?
So we always recommend having a single CSM assigned to the client, at least for our enterprise clients. For our priority services, it's sort of a pooled model, although they have a primary person responsible for the initial onboarding and implementation relationship. But for us, yeah, we always assign a CSM so that there is a single point of contact and the customer feels like they know the person's name who is responsible for their well-being.
Okay. So the next question we have here is from Peggy Pavidis. She asks, when measuring for incentives, do you compensate based on the retention rate or the net retention, or a combo of those factors? For instance, if retention target is 95%, but the individual has a 90% retention, but a 125% net retention, how would you compensate? So I think this is really thinking about what is the KPI structure by which you drive compensation, how much of that is at the individual level versus at the team level versus at the corporate level, and how do those come together? So I'll hand it over to you guys.
This is Dave.
Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say I like to drive the behavior of growth, and I know that it's sometimes a controversial topic when you talk about CSMs driving growth. But the way I look at it is, if our CSMs are driving value and they're aligned to the customer's KPIs and their goals, then there's naturally going to be growth within that account. So I like the some call it negative churn, or I call it net growth number, while still balancing that with logo retention as well.
Yeah, so I agree. You have to emphasize growth. One of the principles that we follow is that we're all about enabling sales. We believe that given the stage of the company, we have to make sure that we're doing everything possible to win new dollars, right? For me personally, we do logo retention in the CSM group, but in the example given, if somebody didn't hit the logo retention target but upsold a whole bunch, yeah, considerations can be made. I don't think that there's anything rigid, especially here at Instructure, that prevents us from doing the right thing, even if the specific parameters weren't met. This is specifically why I've chosen to do a team-based goal around logo retention. It may be that one CSM just has a bad batch of renewals coming up that year.
And frankly, the way that we view it is if we churn a client, the client probably shouldn't have been sold. Right? So that's kind of how we think about it. And to Mitch's point, that actually happens sometimes where, I'll just give a real example. Prior to our launching this Bridge platform, which is focused on corporate learning, oftentimes we would have corporate clients buy our Canvas platform, which is intended to be for the higher education and K-12 market. It's very difficult for a salesperson to say, gosh, Boeing, you're a company, and therefore we're not going to sell you Canvas because it's intended for these markets, even though you really want it, right? And so what oftentimes ends up happening is if you point the wrong people at the wrong product, even though they really, really want it, as a sales executive, you've got to have the courage to do the right thing and walk away from a deal.
Perfect. I think that was a great way to think about that difference between about integrating the customer success aspects into sales. So thanks for sharing that piece, Mark. So we have 2 minutes left. So I wanted to see if any of the three speakers had a closing point they wanted to make here before we close out the webinar.
Hey, Dave, Mark and I are looking at each other and saying, this is all you.
Thanks, guys. No, I think that, like you said, I've been fortunate to be in my career have sales counterparts that really collaborated with us, where we shared a common vision, we had mutual respect, and we really worked for the benefit of the customer. And hopefully today, between the three of us, been able to share some great best practices and pointers that you can take back to your business and drive that kind of collaboration and alignment within your business. And but it's been a pleasure to be on the call today. Thanks to Mitch and Mark and the OpenView team.
Yeah, and thank you to the three of you. I think you guys did a fantastic job and obviously generated a lot of questions from the audience. So as follow-up to this, we'll be sending out the recording of this call to all the registered attendees, as well as the slides, if that's okay with you, Dave.
That's great.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. So anyhow, thank you so much for attending OpenView's webinar on customer success with both ClientSuccess and Instructure. Hope you've enjoyed it.